Hello, everyone. This is Josh and Dan at Monastery Dropouts. And today we're going to talk about more experiences with different saints that we've experienced over time. And Dan's going to start today talking about his experiences with a woman named Ammachi or Amritanandamayi. She lives in India and she comes to the United States, and she's been doing that for probably 30 years now. And we had seen her pretty often for years in the early 2000s. We had gone to different places in the country to see her. And so Dan's going to talk about a few experiences we had at some of her events in the United States.
Yeah, Amma is also known as the hugging saint, and she's blessed millions of people around the world by giving them an actual hug and chanting and just blessing them. It's called darshan. The master blesses them with their presence or a small touch on the head, and there's a transference of that divine energy. Yeah, and Josh and I had been visiting her for, I don't know, years and years. We think we first visited her when we were about 20, 22, and that was in Chicago. And I remember it just being this, like this wonderful festival, like thousands of people, all just joyous. And it's because Amma's bliss that she sends out just permeates the whole event. It's quite amazing. And, I believe she's what some people would call an avatar. And that's somebody who, when they come into this body, they already are enlightened. They already know that, the ego is just a falsity. And the world is like a dream of God. And Alma did reference that once. She said it in a very humble way, but she basically said, "Well, I always knew." There was still apparently there was still some growth she had to do once she was born and in the body, but uh, she was never fooled by the Maya of the world, the illusion of the world. And I've got just a couple of fun stories from our visits to Amma. Uh, One of them, both Josh and I were involved in a little bit. I had gone to an Amma event, and when you go to an Amma event and you want a darshan from her, you want a hug, you get a ticket. And so when I arrived, I immediately went up to somebody who was distributing tickets and asked for one, and I was quickly denied the ticket. They said, no, we've already handed them all out. And this was at a time I'd been visiting Amma for probably 10 years. I'd probably seen her 20 times. And I said, oh, when did you start doing this? And they said, oh, we've always done it this way. Oh, that's odd. So that was in the evening and the first night I arrived. So I stayed overnight. And in the morning, I got there right on time. And I said, okay, I'd like my ticket. And they said, nope, we've already handed them all out. And I said, but the program hasn't even started yet. And they said, yeah, we hand them out half an hour before the program starts. And I said, when did you start this? Oh, we've always done it that way. And I thought this was getting pretty bizarre. And so then in that evening, Josh, you were there too, and we both got tickets in the evening, and it was the Devi Bava, and that event, nobody's denied a ticket at any time. So I knew we were going to get our tickets. But when I went to ask my ticket for the same man who had denied me two times, he said, "Didn't you already get a hug from Mama?" I said, "No." And then he didn't even believe me. He said, "Well, are you telling the truth?" I thought, my gosh, you think I would lie to a saint, like about to Amma? No, of course I'm not lying. So okay, very reluctantly gives me the ticket, gives me kind of a look, and so then, a little later, we're in line to get our hug because you get your ticket, and then so many people get tickets, you have to wait until your letter comes up, and then you get in seats, and you're kind of moving toward Amma. So we had gotten in the seated line, and we were moving toward Amma together, and we were maybe, I don't know, I'm thinking like maybe 30 feet away from Amma. You think that's accurate, Josh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So a
about right.
distance. And I see Amma as she's hugging somebody. Suddenly she looks at me and Josh, and then she looks at her assistant and says something to her assistant, and oh yeah. And then so this woman Amma's right hand person, always with Amma. She walks over to us specifically and she goes, I'm sorry, Amma wants to know, didn't you already get a hug?
Yeah.
And my
Yeah.
jaw just dropped.
Yeah. And my experience with that was because everything at those events, when you're around a saint, things seem to coincide. Like you'll have a desire for something and something will show up or something like that. And my experience of that was it made me laugh because I had some part inside me had wanted to talk to her right hand person. I don't know the woman's name, but I was just intrigued by her for some reason at that seminar or at her darshan, and then the fact that she came over and like specifically came in to us and talked to us, I was like, oh, okay, this is just one of those things where the does that like silly little desire to talk to her, like it just came true in that moment because things like that happen around saints where like your
Yeah.
aversions or your desires just happen so that you can get rid of them. And
Mhm.
so to me, I was like, okay, this makes sense, even though it's so ridiculous. Yeah, because
I've,
I
I've never I've never seen anybody questioned about getting a hug before.
well, and it's funny too because there's thousands of people, and for Amma to like out of thousands of people like point at us two and be like, we need to see what's going on here because they can't have a second hug. Yeah.
And I've known people who have had two hugs, and she doesn't care at all.
Listen, I only bless one. You get one blessing. That's it. Yeah.
And then, so yeah, I was stunned at first, and then I realized I'm like, oh, she's playing with us, and I started laughing because she never asks anybody, oh, haven't you had a hug already? No, 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 you get out of line, you know.
Well, it's funny
And
in the sense that she's like, there's events in India where she gives hugs to like a 20,000 people in a day or something, and then in the states it's obviously a lot smaller, and so it's
yeah,
kind of funny. Yeah.
yeah, that was quite surprising. And but then and then once we said no, we hadn't, it was fine, and we got our hugs. Um, mhm.
Oh, I was gonna say, let me tell you the story of my first darshan, and
Oh
just
yeah.
tell people the power of this. So it's an interesting thing because when you feel that spiritual energy, you can kind of feel it vibrating around you. And we have to discuss in other videos about how at her new center, she's a big complex, a huge center in outside of Chicago. I think it's in St. Charles. Um, she had been driving down the road apparently, but we were in the building. We didn't know she was coming, and then all of a sudden you could just feel the energy spiking up and you knew in that moment that she was coming, and so you'd say to the person next to you like, oh, Alma's here, even though you can't see her, you can just feel that power, like it just moves in like an orb across the entire room. And then a few minutes later, of course, like she just walks in, and to me that verified, okay, this energy I'm feeling is very legitimate because I could feel her presence, and then all of a sudden she must have gotten out of the car and walked in a few minutes later. But my first darshan, it was the beginning of my like my real spiritual path after I had left the religious organizations, and so feeling energy was kind of a newer thing for me. And I remember what you do is you kind of get down on your knees and you hug her because she just stays in her chair, and she whispers a mantra or something in your ear. And maybe Dan will tell more about that later. But so she says different words, or she'll say certain things, and it's a blessing, and that vibration is really powerful. You can feel it, and then you're next to the saint who's just radiating like the sun, this powerful energy. And I remember I got a hug from her, and then I stood up and I started like wobbling, like because when you're used to when you're 22 years old and you stand up, you're not used to getting dizzy and like almost like falling over. But I was just like off balance a little bit because I had so much spiritual energy coming through me, and so someone caught me. I wasn't gonna fall, but they kind of just like grabbed a hold of me to make sure I wasn't getting unstable, and
Yeah.
then they kind of ushered me a couple steps and said, can you walk? Are you okay? And then I got done. But for the rest of the event, basically, I just felt all of this energy vibrating through me. and your thoughts in those moments, those your thoughts and your emotions, they're very clear, pure, and so you just want to like giggle and laugh, and you just feel really, really good. And then usually what happens is after the darshan, you'd go sit down and meditate just to kind of absorb some of that energy. But that's the experience of being around someone who's just radiating this powerful energy. And it's just a pure energy that's coming from the deep, deep within consciousness. And so why don't you tell about your experience with the darshan?
Yeah. Well, first, yeah, I remember feeling her presence before she arrived. That was pretty amazing to me.
Yeah,
It was in Chicago, and she was driving down. Like we were all waiting. We'd probably been waiting like half hour, but actually probably more like 45 minutes or an hour, and just kind of sitting there, waiting. And all of a sudden, I felt this shift in the energy. I was like, is that Amma? And it was about, and so there was a very long driveway that they had to drive down. I
yeah,
would say it was like a full 5 minutes later, and she walked in, and I was like, whoa, that must have been like a mile away because she came by, she could come by car. Well, it was, I would, at least a quarter mile away, but probably a mile. I guess it would depend on how long, when they arrived, how long it took for her to get in the door. But that's a big aura.
yeah,
That's that's quite an aura. And yeah, I would agree. Like you get the darshan, and it's a very blissful energy that you receive from that. And yeah, I have another story about receiving the darshan. And I when you get a hug from Amma, they'll ask you English or what language, and I said English, but I never really understood the point because when Amma would grab me and be chanting in my ear, she'd say, "My daughter, my daughter, my daughter, my daughter." And I thought, I wonder what that means, my daughter. And then one time it was probably after I'd been to visit her 10, 12 times, and somebody said, "Yeah, she always chants either my daughter, my son." And here I thought, "Huh? Well, that's not what she chants in my ear. She doesn't chant my son." And then I realized, like, oh wow, she's actually chanting my daughter in my ear. And I thought, well, that's odd. I was so confused. I was like, does she actually think I'm a woman?
yeah. And
And
you and you've always had a beard, right? Have you always had a beard?
I didn't have a beard at the time, I don't think. I've had the beard for I started having the beard when I moved here. Although I did have a goatee before. It may have been a time when I didn't have a beard. I don't know, but she had always done that though, facial hair or none. And I didn't tell anybody about this when they said, "Oh yeah, she chants my daughter, my son." I said, "Huh?" I was thinking about it, and I started to feel a little concerned because I just didn't understand. I was like, "Does she think?" I think I must not have had the beard at that time. Must have been clean shaven because I
Yeah,
thought
but you didn't look. You
this
never looked like a woman.
right. I never looked like a woman, but I was like, I don't understand. Does she think I'm a woman with short hair or something? I just didn't know. And but then, so it was a couple hours later, I got my darshan from Amma, and this is the only time she said this. But when I got darshan that time, she said, "My daughter's son, my daughter's son, my daughter's son, my daughter's son, my daughter's son," and I thought, oh well, she knows what she's doing, and I
Yeah,
was just amazed because clearly she somehow knew what I was thinking, and assured me that she knew I was a man.
yeah,
But for some reason, she prefers to call me her daughter. And I think that could either be a past life experience. Although I do feel that my traits are very balanced between masculine and feminine. And so that may also be her message. I'm not sure.
yeah,
But it was a fascinating thing to happen. And I found that many of the miracles I've experienced are things that outwardly nobody sees anything, but for me, there's a miraculous experience because I know that they know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think she's ever said my son or my daughter to me that I can remember. She always just said ma 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 ma.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But it's interesting, like, because even just saying it, the vibration from my voice, the vibration coming from her, you could feel the like every intonation, you could feel it like a spiritual vibration into your body. And she'd be
Yeah,
right up next to your ear, like saying it into
right.
your ear. She'd be like, your head was like right here, and she'd be like, ma 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 ma. And then you just feel this radiant energy coming into you. So
Yeah.
um yeah,
Even just there's more miracles that happen and at these events, and one of the miracles is that when Amma comes out, especially for Devi Baba, so it's like 7:30 or whatever. She comes out, she does this ceremony, ritual and blessing water and stuff, and then she starts hugging everyone, and she goes all night. She doesn't eat. I don't know. I don't really see her drink. Maybe she gets a sip of water, but basically nothing. And so from 7:30 p.m. usually to like 10 a.m. in the morning, just continuously. Everyone else, I'm getting tired. I have to take a nap because it goes through the whole night.
yeah,
She's more amped up by the end than she was in the beginning. She hasn't lost energy. She's gained energy. It's incredible.
yeah,
Uh, and it's something that I think when I was young, it didn't surprise me so much. But then as I kept going, and it wasn't just that I got older, but you just see like, oh, she's always like this. She never has an off night. She's never like, oh, I'm was kind of sick today. It's just she's always fully there, fully present, fully energized, and she doesn't get worn down. It's very incredible. That in itself is an amazing miracle.
yeah,
Uh, and then on top of that, so she's hugging people, blessing them, chanting. She's also answering questions. People line up and ask her questions, and she doesn't have to sit there and think about it. She's just immediately giving people amazing, perfect advice. I've heard stories from people of the advice that she'll give, and at least the couple I've heard that she's spot on, and she had no way of knowing the answer. I mean, it's things that just no way to know about.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, actually, I have a story about that now that you mention it. One of
yeah,
our
right.
friends, one of our friends was thinking about buying a house, and he's like, he said, "Should I buy this house?" And she doesn't know him from anyone. She doesn't know anything about his life, like on a personal human, like physical human level. And she
Yeah.
just looks at him and she goes, "No, like, do not do that." And and he was just like, whoa, like I didn't realize it was like this big of a deal. And then so he didn't end up buying this lot to build a house. And then he realized like years down the road, and actually he ended up following Cielo, the monk that we had traveled with.
Mhm.
And his whole life had changed. Like he started doing he switched jobs, he switched everything, and his whole life changed because he didn't buy that house. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, he ended up helping. I mean, he found his life purpose because he did not buy that house. And so it's just so funny that she had such a strong reaction. I didn't actually, until we started talking about this, I did not remember that. But he looked at me and he's like, she just like almost yelled at me, like, do not buy that house. So that was really did you have any other stories you want to tell?
Just I guess just one just to illustrate a little bit more about her consciousness. This one's very brief. I'd gotten a hug from her, and I think it was the last time seen her, and I knew I wasn't going to see her again. And I said, "I love you, Amma," and her response was nothing. She just sat there, completely still. And I think a lot of people would have been like, oh, like hurt or something. But I just realized I'm like, oh, she's totally beyond the beyond. And also, it was kind of a message like, yes, you should go. Like this, we we don't need to interact anymore. This is the end.
Oh,
And And I've had dreams with Amma, a couple dreams with Amma Sen. So it's not like the end, but for in person this lifetime it was the end. And like I said, I think other people would not have taken it well, and I think she would have reacted different to other people. But for me it was the best way because I was like, oh yeah, she's beyond human attachment, and
Yeah.
that's the best thing.
Yeah, I remember in my 20s, people would say this, but I think it's a really important message. And they would say, you don't need to come into physical contact with a saint, or if a saint dies, you don't have to mourn because they can always come to you if you call them, and they will always be there to bless you. Um, and as in my early 20s, I just wanted to be around saints all the time. I just want to feel that energy, and I wanted to learn from them, and I wanted to like have them clear a lot of the obstructions and like help me move forward on the spiritual path. So I kind of I would not understand what they were talking about at a general level. I would understand it, but it would kind of frustrate me because I knew like I'd been around saints and I felt all that power and all that spiritual energy coming from them. And so it'd be frustrating for someone to say, well, don't worry about it because they'll be here. Even though they're physically gone, they're still here.
Mhm.
And I kind of thought that I'm like, this is a kind of a religious response. Like, don't worry, like have faith, and they'll be be there for you. But
Yeah.
but as I've grown on my spiritual path, and I think something similar has happened to you too, where I don't feel when I was in my 20s, in my younger years, I felt a really strong drive to be in the presence of saints, and I felt like it was really really helpful. But now it's not as big of a deal because you can just sit and quiet and meditate, and that consciousness of the divine is all around us, and it enfolds our being. And so you can feel the love arising from that divine consciousness just by taking a few moments and letting your thoughts go away and letting your emotions fall away.
Yeah.
And if you call to saints, they will come. And I remember my first experience of this was in my early 20s when I'd go into a really really dark room and I'd call to different saints, and these little lights would appear like in the distance of my spiritual eye. And
Mm.
then I'd like, is this really a saint, or is this just something that's appearing in this like dark space? And then I'd call another saint, and another light would slowly arise. And all of a sudden, like after a few minutes of doing this, there would be like five lights just sitting there. And you would feel the presence. It's not like being physically in the presence of someone, but you would still feel that blessing from them. And I think that's why we're not so drawn to like travel the world and go see these people, because you experience that presence when you take the time to calm your thoughts and calm your emotions, and allow your consciousness to encounter that wider consciousness. So I like telling these stories about the saints, and I think that it's very really powerful experience, especially if you're feeling kind of lost, or if you need someone to give you direction. it
Yeah.
it it, it is very helpful to be with the saints in those situations. But um there is a reason that everything is united, and you don't have to be somewhere, any specific place. You can experience that united feeling of all the consciousness and wherever you are.
Right. There was one other, I just realized and maybe it wasn't clear when was talking about it earlier. Also, the other lesson I took from Amma's non-reaction when I said "I love you, Amma" was
Mhm.
that her love is impersonal. It's universal and
Yeah,
impersonal. It's
yeah,
pure love, but it's not because, oh, I like who you are. It's
yeah,
just I love everything in the universe because it's she sees everything as a manifestation of God, which it
yeah,
is.
yeah,
And yeah, and I've been fortunate to encounter be in a similar state occasionally, just on small
yeah,
occasions. But I do get that.
yeah, yeah. And I think everyone, that is our basic nature, is to be in that deep awareness. And the times that I've been in those states, you do just you everyone is unique and beautiful because they
Mhm.
exist. But in that sense, everyone and every consciousness is like that, and so you love them intensely, but not particularly for like the human in the small body that they are.
Yeah.
So it's like a non-egoic love, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing with that is that um, we talk about these states of consciousness, and then it might be confusing because we're in these human bodies and we have desires and aversions, and we have these particular aspects of our personalities as humans. And even with Amma, and I think I've heard this with a lot of different saints, and is that they still have a human body, and even though that they have this wider consciousness all the time, they still have these little human idiosyncrasies. And so hu- being human and divine at the same time, there's an intermixing. The human doesn't just fade away, like they're still 100% human, and they're also divine at the same time.
Right. Yeah, it's a bit of a paradox.
Yeah. Well, and I think for us in our experiences, it's similar where like we will go into these really divine states that are like you almost lose sense of your small body. But then a lot of the time you're in your small body, but you experience that expansive state, but you're not so far out of the human body that you you're not. Sometimes you're losing the human body and you think it's just silly, the things of the human body, and then sometimes you're more in the body, and so you're experiencing we're kind of going in and out of it, experiencing it in different ways, different levels a lot. Whereas with people like her, she's probably in that very, very divine state all the time, and then she experiences a little body as well.
Right. Yeah. And back to the impersonal love thing, Dr. David Hawkins, he talks about that too. And he says, once you're enlightened, you're just radiating this love all the time. And he basically said, uh, I had people falling in love with me every day. And he said it can be kind of a trap for somebody who approaches that level of evolution where you're radiating the love. He's like, you have to be careful that you don't get involved in multiple romantic relationships. And he said that's like kind of one of the last traps of the ego. And
Yeah,
so I thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, it's that when you start radiating that impersonal love, everyone wants to be your best friend,
yeah, yeah.
which
Well,
is,
and
I
I
guess,
mean,
is a good problem to have.
yeah, and people who don't even feel that spiritual energy, they probably just feel really good around. Like as a saint, they
Yeah,
just feel really good around you. And they want to be around you, and that's how it was with those people. It's like even when Alma left the room, if you went by her chair that she was sitting in for like 10 hours, you would just feel really good, and you'd feel that vibration because she that all the molecules in that space were just vibrating with that spiritual
right.
energy, and it was very, very powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah, I,
supercharged
I
up.
I had actually seen videos of cults, and they would talk about that where like the cult members would after the cult leader in quotation marks left, the people who were in the cults, like according to this cult video, would rush and like, be around the chair, and I remember thinking about it after I had seen Saints, and I was thinking these videos, they just have no understanding of what that powerful
Mhm.
presence is to be around. And
Right.
obviously, like if there's manipulations and stuff like that, that's not good. But with Amma and people like that, they don't tell you have to stay around them. They
Yeah.
just want to bless you, and then they move on. They're not trying to trap you. So yeah. So I remember watching that video and being like, well, they don't understand. If someone has that much power, I doubt they're trying to do anything but love you. So
Yeah, exactly. I
well, I guess, do you have anything else to share about Amma? Otherwise, we can close the video
think
down.
so. I think it's a good
Okay.
place to stop.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So we're talking about Amritanandamayi, Ammachi. She's very, very powerful, and I think she still goes on tours. I'm not sure if she does, but I think she does. With COVID, she kind of stopped,
Maybe.
but
Yeah, she paused for COVID. Yeah, I think you're right that she's on tour again. So yeah, you can go to amma.org if you want to learn more, AMMA.org.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, let's leave it there. And thanks for everyone for joining us at Monastery Dropouts and have a good night. We'll see you later.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.